Atale Originals presents
His sabatons kept slipping in the thin layer of muck that covered the stony ground, and every time he stumbled, the monstrosity began to close the distance between them. His footfalls clanked and splashed dully, beating out a rhythm of haste that matched the pounding of his heart. He could hear the creature's breath, even at a distance. A struggling sound, as if the huge thing could hardly bear its own weight. That didn't stop it from crashing forward, driving fists into the slimy ground when it gauged itself close enough to try and crush Pierce to a pulp. Every time it missed, it roared and uttered a booming curse in its unfathomable language. Every time it missed, Pierce gave a prayer of thanks that he would not walk the glorious paths this day. Not that it would be so bad, of course, when it was time to die. "I'm just too young," he gasped as he ran. He choked on the foul stench of the monstrosity. It smelled much like the rest of the Underlands. Musty, half-rotted, only much stronger. Probably because it was so close. Pierce slipped again and heard the rush of air as the monstrosity's foot came falling toward the earth. He caught a glimpse of the horrid thing as he righted himself. It towered overhead, easily 70 feet tall, and though most of its features were obscured in the darkness, he could see its long beard wagging back and forth, soggy and dripping with an oily substance. "Yuck," Pierce muttered and bounded away. He'd already been running for days. His training really had paid off. More than that, as bad as his luck could get, he was swaddled in physical boons. The blacksmith had given him many gifts. Silver moonlight glistened on the slick ground, revealing just enough of what was ahead of him to avoid the odd stalagmite sticking up to bar his way. Occasionally the monstrosity would rip one from the ground and throw it at Pierce, a stone missile exploding into thousands of fragments that bounced off his bright armour. Only a holy blessing kept him from being crushed. A shadowy structure appeared up ahead, an old castle left to rot in the endless mire of the Underlands. It had a modest outer wall that had been breached in several places, with tall, spindly parapets, dozens of narrow walkways spanning the gaps between them. Were any of them tall enough for what he had in mind? Pierce sprinted along the south side of the ruined castle, making as if to continue past it. Nimbly, he dodged into a shadowy forest of columns that no longer had a roof to support. He found what he had hoped for there, an intact stairwell leading into a central tower. If he could get up high. The stairs were damp with condensation, every step a risky venture. The stairwell terminated in a hallway that had been barricaded with furniture at some time long past. He charged towards this, barreling through it with an armoured shoulder. Mouldy splinters of wood burst forth as he crashed into the hall beyond. He glanced to the left and right, looking for a way to get higher. Outside, the monstrosity reached the castle and pounded on its remaining walls. Pierce heard the ancient stone blocks tumbling to the hard ground, splatting into the coating of muck, scraping along the wet stone beneath. A fist the size of a boulder tore through the wall at the other end of the hall, ripping apart a huge portion of the castle structure. Crashing sounds echoed from every direction. Pierce looked up, and moisture from the ceiling dripped onto his faceplate. He looked at the gauntlet on his right hand. 2 of the 5 gems set into it still glowed a deep orange. He growled. 1 for the ceiling, 1 for the giant skull. He thrust his gauntleted hand upwards and triggered the blast with his mind. A lance of red-orange fire bore into the blocks of dark stone, reducing them to clouds of hot dust. With a mighty thrust, Pierce leapt through the hole and onto the roof. He was met by the monstrosity's contorted face, skin gnarly like the bark of a tree, its wet beard dripping black sludge onto the castle roof. Pierce dashed for its right eye as it opened a mouthful of broken teeth to roar. He drew his longsword from a sheath at his side, its blade glowing bright blue. The giant's attention went immediately to the weapon, and its eyes widened in fear or rage. Pierce cocked his fist back, then thrust it towards the giant's eye and triggered his final blast. His aim would have been perfect, but for the massive fist that backhanded him by surprise. He nearly lost his grip on his precious sword as he careened through the air, away from the ruined castle. He hit the ground hard, splashing down in a thin layer of muck, feeling it seep into the seams between the pieces of his armour. Wasted the shot, he muttered, getting up and starting to run again. The ground was softer here, and it made the boot sticking worse. He needed to find a way out of the Underlands. If he didn't get back to the Overland to tell everyone about the invasion, well, there was no one else who knew. The Underlord's plans would proceed unchecked. The monstrosity didn't give him another moment to think. It had easily spotted the shining blue blade and came stomp jogging to catch up. Pierce could see where his desperate gauntlet blast had hit, blowing off the giant's ear, which now dangled from the side of its skull, dripping blood or sludge. The thing didn't seem fazed by this, and came on as if no head trauma had been suffered. Pierce sheathed the sword and scanned the environment desperately for hope. If the ruined castle was anything less than a few thousand years old, it would have been near a temple, and a temple should have been built around a convergence. He could use that to get back up to Overland. So, where was the temple? There. A mound of earth with a spire protruding upward. That could be it, but if it wasn't... He committed himself. Pierce sprinted toward the mound, searching for that peculiar feeling of unease he knew should be there. He felt nothing. Then, he did feel something. Right near the spire, not quite where the center of the temple should have been. It was the feeling like the need to vomit, like his guts desired to crawl out of his body and into the muck. He tried to focus. Imagine climbing, he said to himself. The monstrosity was almost on him. His voice quavered in a whine. Come on! He felt a tingle. Then an itch across the surface of his skin. The sensation of moving backward, being pulled up by the neck. The slithering moon faded away to be replaced by the roiling red fire of the sun. He'd never been so happy to see its bloody tendrils flicking about the black sky, pulling it across the vault of day. Now he was standing on a grassy knoll, the muck of the Underlands slipping off his sabatons. The grass recoiled, but couldn't escape. Pierce let out a breath of relief. The ground beneath him heaved abruptly upward, tossing him several feet to the side. Pierce recovered to see that the monstrosity had appeared, buried from the knees down in the soft earth. It had heaved 1 foot out of the ground and was working on the other, screaming at Pierce unintelligibly. He was in shock. People had always said that the monstrosities wouldn't come up to Overland, for they hated the light of the sun, but here it was. He shook his thoughts away and turned to run. There had to be a town around here somewhere.
For only $9.99 a month, you'll get full access when signing up at Atale.app, iOS app available in App Store. So click and sign up now. Atale.app. Let the adventure surround you.